Thank you very much, and may God bless you as we participate. And back to you, Gabriel.
Thank you very much, Honorable. I did mention earlier that all our panelists are logged in and ready for the discussion. I'd just like to let you know who the panelists are, and this is in no particular order. And I'll let you know that when each panelist is coming to present, I will give you uh, their profile in greater detail. But for now, just letting you know who is in, we have Mr. Innocent Biaruhanga. He is Assistant Commissioner of Family Affairs, Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. And today, for this webinar, he is our special guest. We also have logged in our CASO presenter, Mrs. Beat Biengana Bisangwa. She's a Senior Presidential Advisor on Education. We also have Mr. Leonard Imanishimwe. He is Executive Director, Uganda Youth Forum. We have Mrs. Beatrice Langa, a counselor and speaker. She is from Family Life Network. And finally, we have Reverend Canon Dr. John Senyonyi, retired Vice Chancellor of Uganda Christian University. You are all very welcome, our special guest, our presenter, and our discussants. Now, like you had, the COVID-19 pandemic has led to cross-sectoral disruptions across the world. The pandemic did not spare family life and culture and values of our community. With the imposition of the lockdown, families suddenly faced the reality of spending more time together with differing consequences. While in many instances, this strengthened family ties, in other reports, there was an emergence of cases of crime against children, like child abuse, child neglect, defilement, physical abuse, early marriages, and even murder, among other crimes. That's for children and even for adults. The pandemic aftershocks continue to impact things as basic as handshakes, hugs, communal meetings. Basically, we have to do things differently. It has been said over and over again that the family is the basic unit of a community. And in order to have a strong country, you've got to have strong families. It therefore is very important that the issue of family culture and values is discussed. And that is what our webinar today is going to focus on. We're going to start with a presentation of the think piece that was put together by the CASO team. This is going to be presented by uh, our presenter who I had earlier introduced, Beat Beyengana Bisangwa. She is a Senior Presidential Advisor on Education, currently serving as the Technical Advisor on the Global Fund in the Ministry of Education. She is part of the team of technical advisors to the First Ladies of Africa through the Organization of Africa First Ladies for Development, or FLAD. It's based at the African Union in Addis Ababa. At the national level, she is the executive director of the same organization. She is a life coach, certified by John Maxwell Group. She's a board member for the Global Leadership Summit and the Credo. She has a family, 6 children and 2 grandchildren, and she's very passionate about empowering leaders for influence. She holds 2 master's degrees, one in organizational leadership and another in management. And she also has a Bachelor of Science in agricultural economics. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me to the virtual podium, Beat, to take us through the CASO think piece. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Iguma Gabriel, for that kind introduction. I would like to start by appreciating the CASO leadership for giving us this opportunity as stakeholders to be able to hold these conversations about issues that affect our societies in the different spheres and also different seasons, especially now that we are discussing about family and how it has been affected and impacted by COVID. I will start by giving you a little bit about the background, and then I will take you through the laws and policies that protect the family, the framework within which the family operates. Then I will talk about how the family has evolved in light of this coming pandemic, and then how the pandemic has impacted the family, this evolving family. And then I will tell you the recommendations that we think can strengthen this family institution, and then I'll give my concluding remarks. So as a way of background, the Constitution of Uganda, 1995, recognizes the family as the natural and basic unit of society. Under sectoral and economic objectives, section 16, it is stated that the family is the natural and basic unit of society that is entitled to protection by society and the state. The Constitution further defines a family as a group of two or more people related by blood, marriage, or adoption. There are two types of families in Uganda: the nuclear and extended family. The nuclear family consists of a father, a mother, and their children who are related by blood ties or through adoption. These families are either monogamous or polygamous. Families, communities, and nations have a particular culture and values that they espouse. These cultures and values originate from individuals, individual background and tribes. And by culture, we mean ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people or society. And by values, we mean the foundational beliefs, principles, and guidelines that result in attitudes, conduct, and actions. Families, communities, and nations have a particular, according to Uganda National Bureau of Statistics 2014, have 7.5 million households, of which 82% were nuclear families, 30% were female-headed households, and about 45% of the adult population were either single, widowed, separated, or divorced. Uganda Vision 2040 emphasizes the principle of a high moral and ethical society whose citizens are strong in religious and spiritual values instilled with the highest ethical standards. To operationalize this principle, the Social Development Plan, SDP, 2015/2016 to 2019/20 provides for interventions to address challenges facing the family. Also, the NDP2 highlights the importance of human capital development in addressing sociocultural transformation. It further provides for the strengthening of the family to be able to nurture culturally conscious citizens who will actively participate in government programs for wealth creation, sustainable development, and national building. These provisions, of course, offer opportunities and justification for intervention in the family sector, and that's why we are discussing this. Now, concerning the laws and policies that form the framework, we have the Domestic Violence Act, we have Children's Act, we have Succession Act, we have Family and Child Protection Unit of the police, we have Family and Children's Courts, and there's also Department of Family and Culture in the Ministry of Gender, Labor, and Social Development. I'm sure Mr. Byaruhanga Innocent will talk more about this and the many activities that they've done to try and strengthen the family unit. Now, according to biblical worldview, the family is the foundational institution of society as ordained by God. It was the first ever that God established, and it's the building unit of both the church and the nation. In the biblical family, a man and woman come together in a covenant relationship, and they bring up children in a healthy environment, in the fear and obedience of God, and in the knowledge and understanding of life for proper stewardship of nations. Similarly, most of other faiths affirm the family as the foundation of society, and they also recognize it as a source of nurturing, guidance, and mutual support for its members. This truth, therefore, is key in the governance of any state. So how has the family evolved, the family that COVID found? So before colonization, most traditional indigenous families lived in communities with set cultures and values that were strictly adhered to. They were largely agrarian in occupation, and there was a powerful kindred spirit and mutual accountability. The elderly were well catered for, and children belonged to the whole village in a sense. Most aspects of culture promoted desirable and beneficial values like politeness, respect for and obedience to elders, and hard work. Marital roles were clear. Men were household heads and breadwinners, and women were homekeepers and nurturers of children. Men held societies together by setting the rules and societal principles, while women and girls held societies together by keeping homes organized and looking after young ones, the elderly, and the sick. As such, children felt safe at home, and parents had little to worry about. On the flip side of things, though, polygamy was rampant, with men owning almost everything and controlling almost all economic activities and finances. Women were largely looked at as property, and incomes were low, though there was relatively adequate food security. So came colonization. And colonization resulted in education, increased rural-urban migration, and employment of both fathers and mothers outside the home. So this meant that in urban areas, children were often stayed at home alone when they were not in school. Coupled with pure parental skills, this resulted in children that were inadequately nurtured in values, culture, and life skills. At the global level, in more recent times, the family has also been under attack. The definition of family is becoming increasingly obscure and fluid. For example, can you believe that in France now, there's consideration of replacing the term daddy and mommy with the term parent one or parent two, in case they are same-sex or they are any other form. Maybe one will soon be an animal, I don't know. And then the LGBT community also agitating for the expansion of this definition so that it can include families of the gay community. This is where we are going. Through the media and digital platforms, there's increasing influence from Western cultures, most of which is undesirable in our context. With increased unchecked accessibility to the internet, most people have access to pornography, resulting in accelerating promiscuity, trafficking in persons for prostitution, incest, rape, and defilement. The youth increasingly demand for their rights and are more exposed to early sex, substance abuse with related addictions, rebellion, depression, and mental breakdown. All these have impacted negatively on the family, resulting in increased brokenness, domestic violence, divorce, and it has left a negative impact on the children. So how has COVID impacted on this evolving family? Measures to control COVID-19 included the lockdown that saw closure of schools, worship, entertainment, and workplaces. This resulted in families spending much more time together in an environment that they were not used to. The closure has both had positive and negative impact on families, depending on the foundations that these families were established on. For functional families, this meant more opportunities for bonding, training, and opportunities for being innovative and creative together, and even, learning and exploring more in the use of technology and new ways of doing things. But for dysfunctional families, this meant disaster at varying levels and in various ways, with the impact of modernization, the secularism, globalization, and internet being exposed. Now, according to the Criminal Investigation Directorate in Uganda, at least 6,888 children were defiled between January and June this year. Can you imagine 6,888 children being defiled? If you look at this, not just in terms of a number, but in terms of people, human beings, it's appalling. The Uganda Child Helpline, Sauti, has also reported increased cases of child abuse during this period. And according to a recent report from Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, between the months of March and July 2020, a total number of 260 cases of child abuse were reported at police. These include child exploitation, child neglect, child trafficking, murder, physical abuse, defilement, and early marriages. These girls are being married sometimes in exchange to just a plate of food or a few thousand shillings. Very sad indeed. Children have been stressed by the sudden changes in their environment. Many of them were used to spending hours in school, socializing with friends, getting involved in academic and non-academic activities, and now they are at home. They are trying to study in a different environment, and trying to cope with confinement and family dynamics. All of us can tell that this is not easy. Parents too are being anxious and stressed with inadequate skills for, couple relationships, balancing, handling different teenagers and young adult children with making ends meet, etc. Most greatly affected were individuals and families involved in petty trade for daily income, especially in urban areas and those in stable employment. These people of Nekolera Jangi, those who survive hand to mouth. The pandemic has also negatively affected families that are not technologically ready for the new normal. Communally and culturally, people are used to socializing through hugging, big weddings, burials, doing church together, etc., just like Gabriel said. And now, this is greatly limited because of COVID. People are feeling isolated. So COVID has revealed general weaknesses in family sector. However, these weaknesses and strength can be opportunities to leverage on in an effort to establish and maintain health and effective families, especially in this new normal. So what recommendations are we suggesting? For religious leaders and religious institutions, they must reclaim their responsibility of equipping families with relevant life skills. Programs and curricula can be created, or where they exist, enhanced to better groom prospective couples on their respective leadership roles in the family in the modern context. Couples need to be better prepared for parenting their own children and training them for life in general. So religious institutions can actually be proactive in training also young adults in equipping life skills and behaving responsibly, both in private and in public, and holding each other accountable, even holding the older generation accountable, that intergenerational accountability. Now, at community level, we are saying elders and institutions can deal with family matters, and they need to be recognized publicly and acknowledged for that role. Some role in this regard need to be created maybe at LC1 level. Intergenerational dialogues also can be promoted at community level to encourage mentorship, ongoing mentorship, and mutual respect between parents and young adult children. At national level, we feel that there's need to establish a whole ministry dedicated to just family affairs, so as to support the building of strong and effective families through effective policies and strategies. This is not asking for too much if it's acknowledged that the family is the basic unit of society as stated in our national constitution. National values must be clearly defined and integrated into our school system for early childhood education. In terms of culture, we need some adjustments. For example, the scientific weddings of the past 6 months have enabled a number of young couples to get married at minimum cost. And I'm sure most of us have witnessed this. Post COVID-19, this needs to be encouraged by all stakeholders as a measure to reduce the number of couples cohabiting due to the exorbitant cost of financing weddings. Other practices like regular hand washing must forthwith be integrated into practices for public gatherings. So with that, I want to conclude like this. In just a few months, the COVID-19 pandemic has set shockwaves in every sector globally. The family, as always, has been the refuge from the storm. However, while some families found home to be a safe refuge, many struggled to stay in the shelter, and some were even harmed in this very shelter. As we look through the ravage that the pandemic has left behind, we believe that valuable lessons can be drawn for our values and emerging culture that would help us make our homes and families that live there safer and desirable. Thank you for your attention, and we look forward to listening to people's views and responding to any questions that may arise out of this presentation. God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I am glad you didn't end by asking us or giving us a short test and saying, okay, you have 3 minutes. Please write down the national values, Uganda's national values. Because yes, as you went through that and talked about national values, I am sure many like me were scratching their heads and saying, but what are Uganda's national values? And hopefully by the end of this webinar, yes, they exist. Yes, I've come across them before.
Yes.
Yeah, hopefully by the end of this webinar, more light will be thrown on that as well. 6,888 children defiled in just 6 months. Some of these things really, remind us that this is a very, very important discussion to have, and we should have had it even yesterday. Thank you very much, Beat. We have to move on, but before we have to move on to our next discussant, but also there's another thing that you said that has gotten stuck in my mind. Just imagine being referred to as parent one or parent two. Sounds ridiculous. Yes, but that's where the world seems to be going, and we need to do something to ensure that we don't go down that path. And maybe if you annoy your child, they can change you from parent one to parent two. And then when you're being good, you can become parent one again. Anyway. We need to go to our first discussant, and our first discussant today is Mr. Leonard Imanishimwe. He is the executive director of the Uganda Youth Forum and has over 12 years experience in programs that promote abstinence, behavior change for youth, and fidelity in marriage. He is a highly motivated, adaptable, and dependable youth worker. He's very passionate about empowering youth to lead productive and transformed lives through life skills trainings, equipping youth for livelihood improvement, and creating platforms for dialogue and advocacy. He's a fellow of the Achumen Fund and a facilitator at the Uganda Civil Service College and serves on the boards of Uganda Council for Foreign Relations, KIDA, Friends of Renzori, and as an advisor to the Global Health Corps. He holds a Master's of International Business Administration, a Bachelor of Arts, Social Sciences, and a certificate in Program Planning and Management and Leadership Training certificates from the Acumen Fund, Oxid Executive Leadership Training course, certified by INT. And because I saw that, I decided to wear my badge as well. And he has various postgraduate trainings in public health and youth curriculum development. Ladies and gentlemen, invite with me to our virtual podium, Mr. Leonard Imanishimwe.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gabriel Iguma. I want
Leonard,
to take this opportunity
just
to thank.
just a second. I really didn't want to interrupt you, but there seems to be a sound distortion from your end. By any chance, is your device plugged into electricity?
Yes, please.
Because that could be what's causing that sound problem. Are you able to unplug it? Or will we lose you if you unplug it?
I think we can have unplugged it as my voice now.
All right. Unfortunately, both your sound and your internet have a problem. But I think you go ahead and begin. If it's really if we can't follow you, then probably we will call another discussant as we try and fix your issue. But you can go right ahead, Leonard. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. I want to thank Castle leadership for their commitment and dedication in bringing us together. And I want to thank the presenter for laying the foundation and background for our conversation this morning. Just like Mrs. Beatrice Sangwa said, even before COVID, the family was already experiencing problems. You realize that the number of people who were affected by the problems and challenges in the family had gone higher. Like 30% of households were headed by women. And then the high cases of divorce, rape and defilement, but also young people engaging in premarital sex increasing, and 44% of the children being orphaned, and then increasing numbers of teenage pregnancies and child marriages. So COVID really exacerbated an already worrying situation in terms of how the family in Uganda was faring. Now, His Excellency the President in 2017 launched the Year of the Family, and there was that roadmap in which the family should be strengthened and supported. and the Ministry of Gender has been spearheading the initiative of strengthening the family. But COVID brought a new challenge or a new normal where young people now have a lot of time. They have to wake up in the morning without what to, when they have nothing to do. And for the first time, the new normal gives them a lot of freedom that is unfettered, and the parents who had abdicated part of their responsibility and just thought that the school system would be able to support it, now found themselves also in a position that they would be unable even to be able to guide the young people. So this is why we are seeing a lot of cases of defilement, rape, and child abuse, just like the president has highlighted between January and June, all those worrying numbers. My take for this is that even before COVID, the cultural change, the values of virginity, the values of abstinence before marriage were being eroded. I'll tell you, like at Uganda Youth Forum, because we promote these values, we've been getting changes in communities whereby organizations that are supported by foreign donations, for example, say, let the young people have sex, let them access condoms. We now have organizations which say it's my right, the young people have a right to that. Yet, sex in our tradition was only supposed to take place in the arrangement of marriage. Now, young people's attitude towards marriage, they are not looking forward, very enthusiastic about it, because after all, they can have some of the benefits that marriage would give without them taking responsibility. So we have cases of people living together in situations you cannot define. You don't know whether they are cohabiting. You don't know whether it is what kind. You can't easily define what the relationship is. So the value has been eroded. Young people now, the age of sexual debut is about 13 for girls and 15 for boys. So by the time they reach university, they have already experimented. And that affects, for example, some people think we should teach abstinence just for HIV prevention or abstinence to stop pregnancies. But they do not realize that if young people start engaging in a premarital sex, then it will affect their commitment to marriage, because a young girl, by the time she reaches university, if she started having sex when still young, she will have gone through a lot of the so-called heartbreaks. Probably they think it was love when it was actually infatuation. And also, you should have had like gone through 3 relationships of boyfriend. And so her attitude towards she would have misunderstood what love is in the context of marriage. So the values of trust, the values of fidelity, the values of commitment would have been eroded in her. And so no wonder, therefore, that you find that if you asked young people the attitude towards marriage, they look at it, some of them don't think they can be loved because they have gone through bitter and difficult relationships. So it is important, therefore, that behavior change, values of abstinence, fidelity are taught not as a health, not to solve the health problem, but as the foundation of values that build society, as the basis for which we can have a responsible society, a society that is built that will be the foundation for long-lasting relationships in marriage. Now, the other challenge that young people are facing and generally marriage is facing is to do with media, for example. The cultural erosion has been caused by a lot of access to television. Parents think that the best way to engage or keep them children busy is to give them freedom to access to watch television, and it has become a big problem now during COVID because the teachings, the learning materials are being disseminated through television. Some schools have now set up WhatsApp groups, so young people are also now accessing phones on the pretext of being able to follow what their teachers are giving them. But we do not know what else they are watching, and there is no doubt that if, because now it is up to the youth, the young people, to be able to exercise self-censorship. But we all know that some people would be able to send them messages, some videos that are not appropriate, and therefore that causes exposure to things like pornography. We're also seeing cases of stress, people being stressed, and because of the stress in the family, there has been now an increase in violence, and this also has caused the problem of lack of a relationship between the parents and the children, because ideally it would be the COVID situation would have provided an opportunity for parents to be able to interface and talk to their children. But if the relationship is not there, it is sometimes very difficult to cultivate it by then. The other problem that we are seeing among the young people is that now there is lack of father figure. The views of young people towards their parents is sometimes not exemplary. And I think the challenge also has to do with over the last 20 years or so, the campaigns have been on empowering the girl child and less of the boys. Yet in a marriage situation, both the boy, it would require an empowered man, an empowered boy, to be able to exercise his duties and responsibilities as a father and as a good husband. But we see that because some of the community work that we have has been donor driven and foreign funded, most of the programs that have been, whether in school or in the communities that have been targeting young people, have been more inclined towards empowering the girl child. So you will have a situation where you have an empowered girl and a disempowered man in a marriage relationship. And in a view of the changing roles in the family, just like Madam Bit was saying, previously the man was the breadwinner, now with an empowered girl. So there may be a problem of how the men are psychologically prepared to deal with an empowered woman around them. So that has also caused the problems. And I think going forward, we need programs that target men. We need programs that target boys, because then when they are empowered, then they can become faithful husbands, competent men that are able to stand up and protect their families and be able to sacrifice for their families. The other challenge also that we see is socialization, which used to be done by parents with the support of the large extended family, the grandparents, the uncles. Now there is more of either the nuclear family, or in some cases you have single parents, and therefore parents now think the school should do the socialization, and then the rest is left to the media. But we know that the media has its own agenda. Now, most movies now that are coming out of Hollywood, that are in series and seasons, there has been an agenda where a character is introduced to the audience, and later on, this character now is either found to be gay, and that creates a problem. So we're also seeing that foreign intrusion, foreign influence of cultures. And going forward, we need programs that target youth, because we cannot talk about family and marriage as an event. This is a process. If you have had a difficult background growing up, you are most likely going to struggle being a responsible parent, being a responsible wife or husband and father. In terms of government,
Right.
I think government should take responsibility of supporting and empowering their family, and not leave it to donor support or to the UN agencies that may have the money. We need a direct budget support that supports the institution of family, that ensures that our families are protected from Western cultural influences, so that we can, even if we are going in terms of modernization, we can be able to have a hybrid culture where some of the good things that work and have worked for us can be carried forward, even when we are adapting to the new cultures that we are learning from others. And I think also there is need the life skills training. For example, currently, the Ministry of Education is saturating academic materials, but I think also there is a need for the young people to be reached with life skills, with the skills in counseling, to be able to hear them and be able to support them to cope with the COVID situation. So I think the COVID situation has provided a good opportunity uh, for to rethink. One of the things I think is to do with the mindset change. Most of the youth have been thinking that probably the Western countries are better off than us, but COVID also showed that even for Europe and the US, they are also struggling despite their robust health system. So we think therefore that it is now young people we can now start to find homegrown solutions. And that mindset, I think, is very important, because then we can be able to find that there are good things in our culture. And I think finally, the middle class is also, in terms of forming the identity for their children, we've done a lot of teaching our children foreign languages. And if you did a survey in the middle class families, most of the children may struggle speaking the local languages. And that is a problem, because then young people's attitude towards their culture, their language, their values gets diluted, and probably they think that everything good, all things that are good must come from New York or Washington, DC. So I think it is important, therefore, that we also teach our people, our children, culture, because what I'm emphasizing is that to have strong families, we must start from the foundation. How are we bringing up the children?
Okay.
How, what kind of life skills are we giving them? And what preparations for marriage are we giving our young people? Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Leonard. And please, visit the Q&A tab, because right there in that tab, there's already a question in relation to something that you spoke about. Somebody asked about, you know, uh, media, and whether we can do something to ensure, whether Uganda Communications Commission can do something to ensure that as the children use these devices for studying, they are not exposed to dangerous things like pornography. So please, Leonard and all our other panelists, visit the Q&A because participants are putting their questions and their comments there. And if you haven't yet sent your question or your comment, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining us via Facebook or Twitter, remember to use the two hashtags. The hashtags are Castle Webinar and the other is Thrive Family. If you use that hashtag, we'll be able to locate your question and put it to the relevant panelist. Would like now to seek your opinion using our opinion question. And so let's have our first poll. And there it is. The question is, I hope we can see the poll question. The question is, what was the biggest negative impact of COVID-19 on the family? What was the biggest negative impact of COVID-19 on the family? Was it reduced incomes and brought strife? Children became redundant and difficult to handle, increased child abuse, and increased teenage pregnancies. What was the biggest negative impact of COVID-19 on the family? Okay, at the moment, majority are saying reduced incomes that brought strife. Coming in second at the moment is increased child abuse. All right, let's just allow a few more seconds. If you are on Twitter, there's also an opportunity for you to respond to the poll question. So if it hasn't yet appeared on your screen, it will be appearing shortly. Please pick the option that applies to you the most. I'll just allow 10 more seconds and then we'll end the poll. Okay, I believe majority of us have been able to respond to the poll question. Our final result shows that 47% have said the aspect that the biggest negative impact of COVID-19 on the family was due to reduced income that brought strife. Thank you very much. And please, we will have another poll question coming very soon. Would like now to go to our next discussant. Our next discussant is not new to many of us, Mrs. Beatrice Langa. She is engaged as a counselor and facilitator, a speaker on marriage and family-related topics, and in parenting training at Family Life Network, an organization committed to the restoration of family values and morals in Uganda, with her husband of 36 years, Mr. Stephen Langa, who is Executive Director of Family Life Network. Beatrice was a stay-home mother for her two now adult children and gradually entered the world of employment, first doing data entry part-time, and then this was at Yellow Pages Limited, while her children went through preschool. And then as an administrative assistant in a Christian international school for 8 years as the children went through primary school. She then went into human resource management for 14 years, finishing as the head of human resources at International Aid Services, an international humanitarian relief and development agency. She finds great fulfillment in mentoring young wives and mothers to recognize the seasons of their lives and to prioritize their wifely and motherly roles. And in time spent with her three grandbabies, two beautiful little girls and one charming little boy. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics from Boston University in Boston, Massachusetts, United States of America, and a postgraduate diploma in Human Resource Management from Uganda Management Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mrs. Langa.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be with you this morning. My additions to the discussion this morning are not very different actually from what has already transpired. Basically, I would like to highlight and again re-emphasize the issue of recognizing the three God-ordained institutions in our society, and namely the state or the government, the church, and the family. Those are instituted by God, and each one of them has their own distinct role. And I think this COVID-19 pandemic season has brought us to the place where we really need to pull up our socks, recognizing the different institutions and each of those institutions doing their part. Now, none of those institutions can do the work of the other. Each one of them has a designated role to play. And today we are talking mostly about, the family, culture, and values. And we need to recognize that in order for the family to do its work, there are certain other things also that the church must do. And I think those were ably demonstrated or outlined by Mrs. Beat Wisangwa. Thank you very much, Beat. And thank you also, Leonard. So I'm thinking that this COVID-19 pandemic has actually given the gaps that were pre-existent in our families a name or names. We already had the problems that has already been highlighted by the previous two discussants, the main speaker and the first discussant, but now we have names that go with the problems that already existed. We had covered them very neatly. We wake up in the morning, put on our deodorant and head out to the work world, and nobody knew what was happening. But the lockdown actually helped us to see what was happening. So what are we going to do about this? I think that as we are talking about families, it is time for us to recognize that children need values and character. And the best placed people to give those, to pass those on to the children are actually their parents or the family. And God has given us a window. In the first 3 years of a child's life, studies have shown that you can pass on as much as 50% of all the values that you will ever pass on to that child. The first 3 years, 50%. It makes me think of the time I went back to school. I was already in my 40s. Everybody else had established themselves in the career world, but I was in a transition. My children were now going into secondary school, and it was time for me to regroup and enter the world, the real world of career. And when I went back, I went to Uganda Management Institute, and most of my classmates were recent graduates in their early, maybe mid-20s. There were a few people who are also my age, but mostly they were 26-year-olds, 25-year-olds. And what they would do is they would come in the morning and tell us, you know, we did this and we did that, and we were out until 2 in the morning. And we had been told that 50% of our grade would be, 40% of our grade would be the coursework and the tests. And I told myself, if I can just get as much of that 40%, which I have control of, I cannot fail to get another 10 or 15% in the finals to make my pass mark. So it is with raising children. 50% can be passed on by the age of 3. And that is the time when most of us are in a rush to send them to preschool, to send them to these other institutions. So we need to look back at those things, because what is happening now is we are seeing the values or the absence of the values in the families. Those values are passed on by parents. Parents need to rethink the way they are ordering their lives and recognize that there is a season for doing everything. Then parenting is done out of relationship, not simply providing for the children, which is what seems to be the biggest thing nowadays. We are providing the best schools, the best medical care, the best universities, preferably out of the country. And that is all very good. But the relationships are suffering in the process. It's like we're choosing something good over something that is better. So fathers must not be seen as military generals who just make the rules, who come in and everybody scatters. Fathers must be relational. We need to start to relate with our children. We need to start to tell them our stories, simple things. You know, sometimes we think that everything costs money, but there are certain very valuable things that will help our children to grow up with values. And this is what we are seeing here. We are not available. The children are going haywire. We need to take the time to be with those children. Then also we need to start supporting those that are in the work world. There are many mothers out there that are working for different reasons, career, but also to supplement the incomes of the family. They need to be supported. Young mothers need to be able to stay with their children, and I think the government can help with that by making maternity leaves longer so that mothers can spend more time with their children. And also, we can provide spaces for our children to be in, our young children to be in at the workplace, play areas or child care for our children in the workplace to support. And I think the other speakers have also spoken about some of the areas that we are struggling with, things that we are not able to, that have been brought to the light but have not been addressed in the past. One of them is that we have isolated ourselves in our homes. We are not engaging other family members. We are not engaging the community. We live in communities. When we were growing up, if you did something wrong, the neighbors could tell your parents. So as families, we also need to get involved in our communities, hold each other's children accountable, and parent each other's children in the community. Come up with those safe places in our communities for our children so that children can be safe. Create areas for our children to be in and play in, other than just in our compounds, in our gates, because we are afraid of what is happening. There are no safe places. So that's an area where the government can help us going forward. I'd also like to highlight the area of something that already has been raised by BEAT, that we create a forum in the government, a family ministry that really supports, intentionally and actively supports the family. They cannot do the work of raising the children for us, but they can do the work of supporting the family. They can help in facilitating training of families. Many children, many of us, well, the next generation, maybe not my generation, but the next generation of parents were not parented very well themselves. So they're not sure what to do. So we can create a ministry that can facilitate the training of parents, sensitizing parents so that they can do their work. Leonard also highlighted the area that now we are making sex education an area that is only for our health. It's supposed to be for our character. It's supposed to be for the propagation of the next generation of families and the next and the next. So this is where the government can help in sensitizing parents so that the parents can do their work of teaching their children those important things, so that children grow up with values. We are seeing lawlessness. We are seeing a lack of character in this generation now. The slightest provocation and people are throwing stones, hitting breaking people's property. That is not right. We are losing something. We are missing something in our parenting. And we need not to handle the symptoms, but to handle the problem. And the problem is, go back home, help us to sensitize the parents with a program that is built by parents, not built by the government. The church can help, and we can sensitize parents to do their work well so that the next generation of Ugandans, our culture, our values are upheld. Values, little things that we are supposed to do but are not doing. I mean, we used to sit at home in the evenings and roast maize. Can't we do that? Is that a lot of money? Employment has taken up all our time at the expense of our families. So that is my offer for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Mrs. Langa. And you really have built on many points that had been earlier made. You spoke about, uncultured, uh, a generation that was not brought up right, now bringing up another generation. And there's actually a question in relation to that. The question is from Agnes Chiravo. If you can visit the Q&A and respond to it. She asks, what do you think of an uncultured generation raising the next generation? All panelists, please visit the Q&A. There are a number of questions that are streaming in right there. Please respond, and participants, please continue posting those questions. Our panelists are ready and eager to respond to the questions as they come in. I'm sure by now you have realized that this webinar could be split into a number of full day, kind of workshops on children, on parenting, on work-life balance, and many other things. But all our panelists are doing and discussants are doing a great job at fitting all of it in just a few minutes of a discussion. So your questions will help dig in further on each of those issues. I'd like now for us to take our next poll question before I invite our next discussant. So we'll take our second poll question, which should be on your screens right now. And the question is, what is one of the most significant changes brought by COVID-19 in relation to our culture? What is one of the most significant changes brought by COVID-19 in relation to our culture? First option, we are now forced to wash our hands frequently and sanitize, thus keeping clean. Our greeting culture of hugging was not hygienic and has now been eliminated. Big weddings and funerals have been curtailed, thus helping us to reduce costs. So all of these have happened, but the question is, what is one of the most significant changes? So of these three, according to you, what is the most significant change brought about by COVID-19 in relation to our culture? At the moment, majority of us are saying big weddings and funerals have been curtailed, thus helping us to reduce costs. I will allow a few more seconds. And if you are on Twitter, if you haven't yet seen that poll question, we'll ensure that you're able to respond to this poll question. The technical team will post this on Twitter. Twitter, Facebook, and wherever else you are, if you are posting a question or a comment, please use the hashtags Thrive, Family, and Castle Webinar. When you use the hashtag, our teams are able to pick up your question or your comment and make sure that they are put to the correct person, or they will also form part of the report that we will put together after this webinar. All right, we will end it there. Majority of us have said big weddings and funerals have been curtailed, thus helping us to reduce costs. That was 61%, and 29% said we are now forced to wash our hands frequently and sanitize, thus keeping clean. Imagine it took a pandemic to remind us that it's good practice to keep our hands clean. All right, we're now going to move to our next discussant. Our next discussant is Reverend Canon Dr. John Senyonyi, retired Vice Chancellor of Uganda Christian University. And I will quickly add that I am a proud former student of Uganda Christian University. Reverend Canon John Senyonyi is happily married to Dr. Ruth Nantege Senyonyi, a professional counseling psychologist and deputy director at the Bank of Uganda for the last 35 years. They have 4 adult children, 2 of whom are married, and they have 4 grandchildren. He holds a PhD in mathematical statistics from University of Melbourne, Australia, a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Nairobi, and a Master's of Arts degree in Evangelism Theology from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in the United States of America. He lectured at Makerere University until 1987 before following God's call into itinerant evangelism. From 2001 to 2020, he served at Uganda Christian University, UCU, in different portfolios as university chaplain, as a deputy vice chancellor, and eventually he became the vice chancellor of the university. John's life was deeply influenced by the East African revival. He came to faith in Jesus Christ during his first year at the University of Nairobi in 1976. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a privilege to invite the next discussant, Reverend Canon Dr. John Senyonyi. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. I hope you can hear me clearly. Let me just begin
loud
with
and clear.
Yes. I want first of all to thank all the presenters before me. They have actually made my work much easier. I could have just said all of the above and then just add on a few points here and there. And that's the advantage of being last in the presentation. But let me just say, I want to begin with a couple of comments. The first comment is we need, I think, to look at COVID as an opportunity more than as something that, as a drawback on our life, on the things that we do. When COVID broke out, I was still the Vice Chancellor of Uganda Christian University, and that is the opinion I took. And we started looking at various possibilities of how we can enrich, we can use this experience to enrich our students, our staff, and everyone. Of course, we didn't even know how long it would be, but I want to say, I think for me, that attitude was very useful. And so we need to look at that even in relation to family. My second comment is really more of a quote, and I'm not quoting it verbatim, but a quote from Martin Luther, the Reformer. Martin Luther said something like this: "You cannot stop birds from flying over your head, but you can stop them from nesting in your head." And I think if we bear that in mind, then let us look at the low-hanging fruit that we can pick in terms of the situation we are in and how we can enrich our families on the topic that we are discussing. Let me also mention, just in light with that, one of the things that Mrs. Bisangwa read in that paper, which was actually a bit shocking to me. I do have the Constitution in my library, but for some reason I have never really read it from cover to cover. The aspect of defining family as something between two or more people, for me, opens up a window for problems for this nation. We either are ready to state clearly that it is between man and woman. Yes, they may be polygamous. As Christians, we may not accept that, but at least it's man and woman. But the moment you say two people, then the door is opened for LGBT. And by the way, they often add an I, intergender. So that, to me, I think is a very, very critical thing for us to bear in mind. I'm going to try and be very brief in many of my comments and probably even post questions to all that are listening. The first one, I think that's very important in relation to the paper that was presented, because it is family, culture, and values. And I think values here seems to be the most important aspect that we are trying to land at. And we should be able to ask ourselves, how are values imparted? And why are they essential for us as a society? When I was Vice Chancellor at the university, one of the things that I said frequently to the staff and the students at that university is that people, when we hire people, we hire them for their certification and for their skills. But more often than not, if not always, we usually fire them because of their values. When their values become incompatible, and when I talk about values here, I'm using it more or less like a synonym to character. And so the whole aspect of values is, I think, for me, the most important thing that we are discussing today, and how we can arrive at those values. Most problems in the world are not actually caused by skills, unless, of course, the skills and the knowledge that people have is misused. But the reason it's misused, again, is usually values. And so the discussion of values in relation to family is very important. Furthermore, I would go ahead to say that I think the most important aspects for inculcating value would be, or the most important areas would be the religion that people have, because there are religions that will not promote good values, but also the culture. And that's why culture is very important. Those are very, very important aspects that we need to look at. And culture is obviously an aspect that we are discussing today. So the role of culture in strengthening family, in nurturing values, is very critical for us. When I came to Christ in 1976 and read the Bible from cover to cover, one of the most significant aspects that for me came out was to realize that many of the biblical values that were espoused in what I was reading were closer to the African culture, to my own culture, than they were to the Western culture. And so I would say that it's very critical for us to really look seriously at culture. And it has already been mentioned, and I want to just emphasize the importance of culture. And that culture, or even the religious values, are usually passed on through family. And so family, of course, others may also support, but they are usually passed on through family, and the others are merely supportive. And I liked the point that Mrs. Langer made, that in the first 3 years, you pass on 50% of the values. And I'll be coming back to this, but let me just say this. For me, one of the most tragic things in terms of failure of family, even pre-COVID, is the fact that parents started to take their children before 3 years, or even before 4, or when they are ready for pre-primary and primary school, taking them to boarding school. I mean, I have a strong objection even to the very fact that children would be taken to boarding school in their primary school years. I think that is one way of relinquishing the responsibility of family to take care of their children. No wonder during this time of COVID to me, as I said, is an opportunity. What COVID has done is to reveal the gaps, to reveal the weaknesses that were already pre-existent in our families. And because as families, we have not been paying enough attention to our children, we send them to boarding. Now, and of course, that means probably something like 9 months they are away. The only time that you have is 3 months to be with those children. And if we talk about the urbanized parent, during those 3 months, the parent is away from home. The more elite families at that point then have their children being parented by maids and by the media and things like that. So you can see the trouble that, and I highlight these just for us to be able to understand that whatever solutions we come up with must be able to address those very ones. And I really commend my sister Bit for presenting that paper, because I think it went a long way in addressing a number of those issues. So whether if a family that was functional and a family that is dysfunctional, it did not just become functional or dysfunctional during COVID. It actually was functional before, and probably it has been highlighted. All the weaknesses have been revealed, and the dysfunctional family has been dysfunctional all along, where the parents are actually absent from their families. Now, I appreciated among the recommendations the aspect of religious institutions, particularly coming first, because the religious institutions are really saying that even when it comes to matters of culture, God and what he desires, God and what he commands come first. That even culture must stand judged by the religious convictions. And so to me, that is very important. But here is another challenge. I do get the feeling that many of our leaders in religious institutions don't even know what to do. So when you talk about family, many of them probably already have dysfunctional families themselves. Take, for example, and this is something that we used to say when I was doing my undergraduate studies. I'd just come to Christ and all that. That one of the things that surfaced and that was quite evident was that many children who were born to Christian, committed families were not turning out as well as they should. And part of the reason is because many of these parents were actually absentee landlords. That's what we used to call them. So instead of being with the children, or if they were home, if visitors came, the parents would tell the children to get off their beds and eat food that's less palatable and things like that. And so there was a sense in which parents did not pay sufficient attention. Now you tell those same parents, please now go and pay attention to these children. And I say, I think something more needs to be done there. Let me also mention, in terms of the recommendations, which I greatly appreciated, I just want to add this on the aspect of government. And I'm glad that my sister, Mrs. Bisangwa, is very involved in education, and I've been involved in education myself. But I think when we talk about government, we need to specifically bring out the role of education in nurturing strong families. Many of you are aware that not too long ago, there were books that were financed by UNICEF, I think it was, that were actually taking us to the wrong side of things. Now, here is another thing, and that is that education, many parents, and I think it has already been mentioned, have actually given the responsibility of parenting to the teachers. And so the education then takes away the child from family. When my children were in secondary school, there was a rule that came out of the Ministry of Education at the time, and this is quite a few years ago, which was saying that a parent should only visit the visitation days when it was boarding, because my children were only there in secondary and high school, that they could only visit once a term. Now you can see a policy like that and the harm that it brings. Because the education that I have always known traditionally is that education is between the parent, the teacher, and the child. You cannot fire any of those. Those three must be part and parcel. You just have to find different ways of engagement to ensure that education is actually everyone is taking part in the education of the child. Now with the COVID, I really commend government for the questions that are published on a daily basis in the media. But here is the problem. I do think that we need to do a bit more where there is also an attention to how can the parents participate. Many parents think that they must know mathematics or they must know chemistry or they must know. That's not the point. Because I think this is an opportunity for us to recover what we lost before, the informal education. And for that reason, the parents, at least just being there and encouraging and touching the child, because touch, by the way, is educational, and speaking to the child and so forth, those are very important aspects. Now, I kind of feel like in what has been done, which is commendable, like I said, we have missed out on the aspect of helping the parent to know how to cope with a child who is at home. That should be part and parcel of education, and so that the parent is actually quite involved. And may I say that in the recommendations, the other thing that I did not see there, and yet it's a mega aspect, is media. You know, you cannot talk about influencing the family, changing the direction of family without bringing in the media. The media is very critical in all this. My final point, because I want, you know, in the 10 minutes, it's a tricky thing, but my final point here is that I really feel that many of the young people lack role models. Because even when you talk about, there was a question that was raised about dysfunctional parents raising children, I mean, dysfunctional in their past life, you are actually talking about role modeling, which is lacking seriously. And where will it begin? I think it has to begin with each one of us. Remember what I said from Martin Luther? You cannot stop birds from flying over your head, but you can stop them from nesting in your head. So it leaves a question to each and every one of us. What are you yourself doing before you start answering the larger questions in society? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Reverend Canon John Senyoni. What are you doing yourself even before you ask about society? Thank you. Thank you very much. Another question is, for everyone that's logged in your parenting, have you been a present or absent landlord? Now, lucky for you, that's not our next poll question because those answers could have been a bit tricky. But let's take our next poll as we prepare to hear from our special guest for this webinar. Our poll question now is, what was the biggest positive impact of COVID-19 on the family? Biggest positive impact of COVID-19 on the family? Is it that it gave families extra time to bond and improve relationships, enabled some families to explore innovative ways of earning income through avenues that they would not have thought of, enabled parents to be involved in schoolwork of their children, or ensured that fathers were home earlier because bars were closed? Fathers, have you seen that last one? Seems to be a general opinion that fathers were coming home late not because of work. So the four options here are of the biggest positive impact of COVID-19, and sorry, you can only choose one. Did it give families extra time to bond and improve relationships? Did it enable families to explore innovative ways of earning income through avenues that they would not have thought of? Did it enable parents to be involved in schoolwork? Or did it ensure that fathers were home earlier because bars were closed? We have our results in, and a majority of us have said the biggest positive from COVID-19 is that it gave families extra time to bond and improve relations. Thank you very much. We will have a final poll question probably after we hear from our special guest. It is now an honor and a privilege to invite our special guest, Mr. Innocent Byaruhanga. He is the Assistant Commissioner of Family Affairs at the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. Mr. Byaruhanga is a public policy specialist with over 14 years in management and social development at local and central government levels. He is currently an Assistant Commissioner, Family Affairs at the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development and heads the Family Unit. Mr. Byaruhanga has been instrumental in coordinating the institutionalization of International Day of the Family, development of the National Roadmap on the Year of the Family 2017 in respect to the Presidential Declaration, overseeing the finalization and dissemination of the Uganda National Parenting Guidelines, the coordination of the National Parenting Agenda Initiative, as well as national psychosocial support and protection services. He is a member of the International Federation of Social Workers Association, National Association of Social Workers of Uganda, and Commonwealth Association for Public Administration and Management, that's of Canada. He is married to Mary Chisembo, a nursing officer at Mulago National Referral Hospital, and they have a family with 3 children. Ladies and gentlemen, invite to the podium our special guest, Mr. Innocent Byaruhanga. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I hope I can be heard.
Yes, sir. You're loud and clear. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much, the Mr. Gabriel Iguma, our moderator, for this morning and webinar. Allow me to appreciate very much and to say that I'm exceedingly humbled to be the chief guest of this important webinar. And the webinar is particularly looking at the topic on COVID-19, an opportunity to thrive for family, culture, and values. Allow me to say 4 things. That first of all, I bring you greetings from my family and greetings to your families. I want also to bring you greetings from our senior leaders of the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, namely Honorable Frank Minister, the Minister of Culture and Gender Affairs, Honorable Nachwala Kiyingi, the Minister of Youth and Children Affairs, and the Minister of Elder and Disability, Honorable Sarah Kanyike, as well as our senior technical head, the acting permanent secretary, Mr. James Ebitu, and my colleagues. We bring you all together greetings, and we want to bring deep in-depthness to Council Think Tank for having organized a series of discussions around the opportunities we can find in rebuilding the family culture and values of our nation. Second note, first of all, to make a few, some, how do I call it? I would call it that make a few footnotes, which may be, I may not have the pleasant language or diplomatic language to use, but there are fundamentals for this morning's discussion. One, to say that conventionally in Uganda, family and culture have been thought to be matters peculiar to individuals and not matters that are to be in the main public discourse, ideally, but in practical terms for that matter, in terms of when we are looking at actual resource allocation, when you are looking at regular public debates, and at the end of the day, matters to do with how does the public respond in view of globalization and technological advancement. The other aspect is to do with the ambiguity around the understanding of the family vis-a-vis a household. The current government planning framework has pre and post-independence, and as we have it today, focuses on the household and not on the family. And I will come to a bit of the understanding of the family in the context of when we are saying two or more family members. Then the other aspect as a dilemma is the issue of the term sensitization versus education. Most of the social development issues, as of differentiating them from the social service of the mainstream, which I call formal education, have been made and taken to be understood as a mode of delivery to be sensitization. And I stand to put before us that are listening in that matters to do with social development matters to do with what we would call public education. And why do I say this? That a number of important things that relate to the family have been reduced to what you would call, let's sensitize parents, but yet parents don't have skills, for example, on how they should care and nurture children. So would you call that sensitization, or it would be education? Because you do need particular skills, you assess them, and at the end of the day, you are able to scientifically say, if I'm able to do A, B, C, D, I can have a child that I would want to reach at a certain level. I would want a child with certain values, and these are the values I can realize. And so the conventional social development in this country has not looked at the issue of community education. It has left it to what we would call sensitization, and at the end of the day, we are not seeing the results that we need. Lastly, is as the dilemma points of inference, is the shift from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals. How our actions, our missions should relate today with the sustainability of the next generation. How we should be bothered about enjoyment of the good things that we are enjoying today. And we have them preserved, protected, and promoted for the future generation, even a million years to come. And so the family and the culture department, where I gracefully come from, stands to protect and promote, as well as preserve, the family and cultures of Uganda for the prosperity of this nation. allow me on the second note, therefore, to inform us who are gathered in this platform or listening in that the Family and Culture Department stands for about 8 things, major 8 things, namely marriage and values as the first point, parenting, psychosocial support and protection services, family life education, family economic strengthening, promotion of languages, our local languages in this country, culture and creative industries, issues to do with the strengthening and coordination of the cultural institutions in this country, matters also to do with general culture, heritage, and preservation. Those are matters that we stand for and which are critical to this nation. Now, I would like to jump on in that same line to appreciate the timeliness of CASO's initiative of having this webinar. That first of all, we have had COVID, but also too, that the family institution has been very pivotal in ensuring that Ugandans are not overshocked by COVID-19. And this reminds me of reminding us that the fundamental rules of the family are 4. The fundamental rules are 4, namely production, reproduction, security, and socialization. The discussion we are having here permeates in the 4 core functions of this, of the family institution we are talking about. And so when COVID came, we all retreated to our families and we didn't have any other option anyway. But this had been an issue we are saying, you know, my family is private. I'm not bothered about anything. I'm at work, I'm a commissioner, I'm vice chancellor, I'm whoever, whichever titles we may use. We had to retreat to our families. And we found a number of things that we had not attended to that they are important. So for me, that's the first opportunity. I would say thank you, COVID, for having made us retreat to our families. But it was again a point of reflection then on what is it that at family level, family members have neglected. Namely, when you talk about the family time, when you talk about the conversations that we're supposed to have about our values and norms and practices and what is going on, at the same time, what is it that government has been able to concretely attend to in terms of family specific programming and interventions. So for me, I was one of the people who were happy to see that whichever negative has come on and whichever discussions have come on, I was very happy that this opportunity came. And for me, I was the first beneficiary of this kind of opportunity, regardless of the inconveniences of the economics that have been talked about and many others. Now, I would like that I put you first to 3 important things. One, namely, the fact that we had International Day of the Family, which is always commemorated every May 15th. And I would like to hear and now invite CASO management that we should have a serious conversation. Now that I know that I have serious allies in terms of family and values and culture, we should have a conversation on 1, participation, 2, promotion. Number 3, in terms of programming of the family institution. So May 15th, we had a theme which was talking about a theme which was very, very important and was reflecting on a peaceful family being pivotal to peace and sustainable development. And this day was important for 2020 because we're observing also the 25 years since the World Social Summit sat in Copenhagen. And what he was reflecting on at that time, 25 years ago in 1995, was how do we come up with family-friendly policies and initiatives that can enable humanity to live peacefully, can enable humanity to live productively. At the same time, we have equitable development. At the same time, it was the time we're observing the 25 years of the Beijing Plan for Action. And the point here was to reflect on gender-based policies and programming and actions or interventions that they can enhance the equality of man and woman in terms of their livelihood and their prosperity. Now, in relation to what our distinguished discussants have mentioned, not mentioning any order and not mentioning any name, but first of all, tribute to Madam Bisangwa for that wonderful presentation. We realize that when we are talking about parenting, when we are talking about values, when we are talking about matters to do with the father figure and the point of us, the point of us being able to balance the equality between men and women, being able to focus on family and a call that we have made about having a family ministry, which I would be grateful to see that comes on board, because in line also with the Mrs. Langa, she was saying that we have 3 institutions, namely the church, maybe a religious institution for that matter, we have government, and we have the family. I would, in that sense, I would gladly be happy to see. But importantly, when we look at that, we reflect on issues that are important in terms of how do we build sustainable social networks when, for example, the whole world now is engaged or faced with a number of calamities, emergencies, and economic strifes. We have gone through a number of emergencies, and including but not limited to droughts. We have had different accidents happening and killing people. We have had diseases, HIV, AIDS, and all that. We have had now COVID-19. How do we build strong social networks? Building from the one of the fundamental core rules of the family. How do we build that so that we are able to have the social security that we need? Number 2, how do we build a national guidance agenda as an opportunity? I always joke with my friend in the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, Commissioner Kakong, and say we are in charge of national guidance. What is it that is on table that we are guiding the nation on? And this conversation is an opportunity that CASO presents us when we are talking about the COVID-19 opportunity, and we are reflecting on culture, family, and values. The other issue that is important as an opportunity, how do we advocate how do we influence government prioritization, so that whatever is talking gender compliant, family compliant programming and interventions. How do we, for example, improve a youth livelihood program which can look at the dynamics between this youth who has been given resources but has no land, and the only land he or she can access is with the parents, but the parents are not known, are not in the know of the program, and at the end of the day cannot make this youth accountable to the family in terms of the usefulness of this program. The same with the Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Fund. All these conversations, we are having them, but they are not taking deep of what we want to see. How do we talk about gender-based violence and we are saying the man is a monster in a home, but we are not listening to this man and saying the challenges that this man is facing, and we correct this monster in a home who is battering this woman.
Right.
So how do we handle this? So the other opportunity that we need to look at is how do we, going forward, make a national assessment on the family response, on the status of the family for that matter. And we are able therefore to come up with a national family response plan. So that at the end of the day, going forward, all these shocks that we have faced, and as have been outlined and opportunities were laid out, then we are able to respond accordingly and have a strengthened family institution. Now, on the last note, I would like to say that the department, in terms of promotion of culture and values, even within and outside the context of the COVID-19, we have realized the following things. One, that we have been at the media and in some platforms in terms of conscientizing parents on their roles in terms of child care and protection. We have also had to design the assessment criteria for districts in terms of coming up with the national psychosocial, mental health and psychosocial response that needs to be done. And number three, we have also, I want to tell stakeholders that gladly for the first time, and if it was not COVID, we are coming up with the first ever policy on the family. And it highlights just two most important things. Number one, it highlights what are those family values that Ugandans need to have. And they crop from the understanding of our brothers and sisters in Directorate of Ethics and Integrity in coming up with the national 10 ethical values. We have the 13 national values, national family values that the country will be able to know, and will be able, I think, to make a way forward in terms of values promotion, which fundamentally, as Dr. Senyonyi has actually elaborated on, and I want to applaud his presentation in terms of discussion. The other one is that we are grappling with, if we are talking about a strengthened family that can build a nation, what is this minimum family care package that we need? If we are talking about a good family, a family that we can be proud of, what are the basic essential things that should be present so that actually all stakeholders, government and development partners and everyone can rally behind and then we are able to say, okay, we have the challenges that are affecting the family. So with this, I believe we will be able to build a good family, we'll be able to build a strengthened culture. I am glad about the hybrid culture discussion and what needs to be done. Probably time is not on our side to elaborate more on matters to do with the culture, because part of the culture pains us, most of us, is that of programming, but we don't want to program culture in terms of addressing the positives. For example, researching and documenting the positive culture items and practices that are in this country, and we build on to inform the kind of challenges that we're having, be it FGM, be it the general GBV, and all other issues. So I want to, therefore, on behalf of the Minister of Gender, applaud CASO for this important webinar and for this invitation. And I would like to have more of actually physical engagements with the organization so that we are able to build a critical mass that can talk to the silent majority voices in our public programming of this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biaruhanga, our special guest. We are glad that you've shared those thoughts with us. And for the participants, I think many of us did not know that, your office actually existed. So I know that now that people know that this critical office exists, people will be supporting you and even praying for you, because if the family is attacked, the very foundation has been attacked. Thank you very much. And some of the things you have mentioned are actually entailed in questions and comments from those joining us for this webinar. So if you could visit the Q&A, and I'd like to thank all the panelists for the good job you're doing with responding to the questions. Somebody, Alex Wesije, on culture says, culture has a UTI, which is something unique, something true, and some lies. We need to promote the unique and truth and counter address the lies. I just picked this up because it's something that our special guest mentioned in closing. Mr. Biaruhanga, you also mentioned, you picked from some of the things that Reverend Dr. Senyonyi said. And I'd like to pick up on one where he said, we have to think about how values are imparted. As a ministry, as an office that's in charge, both your ministry and that of national guidance, the values that you talked about, how exactly are these values imparted? You talked about the media, but what method do you use for imparting the values that you've talked about, the values we should be having as a nation? Mr. Biaruhanga?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it comes to what I did say, that first of all, my easiest answer to this is that the family institution is the first school, is the first education institution for values. And by the way, for even we're talking about educational materials, if the parents were to come together as teachers and the rest, they would still do it within the family. So the first answer is that imparting of values is through the family institution, through every family head in this country. The other one is that we are at the ministry, and this comes to what I was saying, that while the Minister of Education is responsible for formal education, for that matter, if I may use that word, Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development is responsible for what you do call informal, but what you do call community or public education. Anything that is important, including what you call values, that is our role as Minister of Gender, Labor and Social Development. And I want to share with with us that, for example, this ministry has a communication strategy on promotion of norms, values, and positive mindsets among young people in Uganda. It's a book published, a document published in 2016. In that document, we are highlighting how we should impart values, thankfully, about the mindset change. How we should be able to change the values and mindsets of our young people to look at things in a positive way, to be industrious and creative, and to know, for example, the value of patience about life in terms of whatever they are doing and pursuing, not hurrying for anything that, for example, if Joy, my senior brother, if Senyon is like 50 years, you find a youth wants to have the same property that Reverend Canon Senyon has had, and it has had to work for the last, I'm sure, about 20 or 30 years. But someone has come from university and wants to solve. We are trying to have strategies and forums, for example, the parenting forums that are designed within our department to teach about values that parents need to have, and the values that they need to pass to children. Actually, the crisis we have about values themselves, and so they have no values again to pass on children. That's the crisis we are having. And this crisis needs to be confronted by both of us, and institutions like us, so I think, are handy in terms of how this can be addressed. In terms of the strategies, the guidelines, the manuals, the Uganda National Parenting Guidelines highlight a number of those values that we need to look at. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. You've also brought up the issue of, the fact that this is kind of, it cuts across a number of ministries. It's not just one ministry. So I'd like to understand from you what can be done to ensure that whereas different aspects fall in different ministries, there's harmonization. Let me give an example. If we say that these values are imparted mainly through education, or if education is one of the avenues, how exactly do we ensure that this is included in the way people are taught? If we say it's mainly through the family, how do we encourage the families to go ahead and do this? How do we, somebody talked about visitation happening once, but if we're expecting the parents to be the ones imparting this, and then we tell you to visit your children just once in a term if they're in boarding school, so how do we, let me call it, streamline it so that regardless of where it falls, we have a method, a known method?
Yeah, thank you for that invaluable question. Three things. One is that on my desk, I have a document which is not complete that talks about the mainstreaming strategy, family mainstreaming strategy in our ministries, departments, and agencies, whereby I want to look at the different ministries, what they are putting up together, what they are doing as well for their mandates, and saying, okay, what is the family lens in water and environment? What is the family lens in when we are talking about agriculture and we are talking about nutrition and malnutrition in terms of health and agriculture? What is it that we are talking about in education? When we are talking about curriculum, there is a document about the parenting curriculum. What is it that we need to talk about? So we are having a document that is supposed to streamline this in terms of the mainstreaming strategy, and we hope then that we will have the bits and pieces of what is in our sister ministries and agencies and stakeholders, and we talk from the word to go. But two, we have come up with what we call the National Family Strengthening Reference Group. This reference group is a technical national arm of government and our ministry that tries to bring all the initiatives about the families together for ease of coordination, implementation, lesson sharing, and at the end of the day, policy, evidence policy generation and implementation. So we hope, and this platform is about a year old, thanks to our collaboration with Child Health and Development Center. We hope that in this, we are going to generate a structural implementation vehicle that reaches up to the village in this country, so that we are able to hear the voices and sounds of whatever is happening to someone, to every person, even if it is in his bedroom. And then we are able to respond accordingly. So first of all, we have had that overarching national platform. Want this, we are still designing and debating. And for me, I would again get back at think tank. Think tank, we are supposed to come and engage in a debate and say, how does this reach to the grassroots together? And then from there, we are able to intervene, to prevent, and at the end of the day, we are able to see the results that we need. I want to say that our ministry stands for prevention than response. When the family is having challenges, then we have failed actually our role as the ministry, because we should have prevented, for example, the 6,000 teenage pregnancies and other related early marriages that have since gone on during this COVID. That should have been prevented. Unfortunately, during COVID, at the national level, social development, we are caught up in between that kind of dilemma in that sense. So we are supposed to have the structures that are supposed to respond, and we develop what we call the early warning mechanisms, so that those early warning mechanisms are supposed to inform us of what should be done when in advance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sure when a person from CASO comes to give closing remarks, they will tell you of how CASO can continue engaging and supporting you in this very critical role. Now, we have so many questions that have come in, and our panelists have done an excellent job at responding to many of them. I'd like to send a special shout to those who are joining us on Facebook. I see Mr. Rochard Kawesa sent in your comments, Ms. Christine Iga, Nagi Love, Mr. Mugisha Lawrence, a number of people on Facebook sending in their questions and their comments. Please continue to engage there. Use the hashtags that we shared earlier on. Your comments will also, be collected and form part of the report that we'll have from at the end of this conversation. I'd like now to go to Mrs. Langer. Mrs. Langer, in your discussion, you mentioned, what it was like in the past, where, parents didn't only parent their children, they parented other children as well. And things have changed quite a bit. How do we do that in our current situation, where if you as much as look at my child or tell them what to do or how to do something, as a parent, person ends up feeling so insulted, you're going beyond your boundary, I know how I should be raising my child, even if I'm doing it wrongly. How do we deal with that?
Like I said earlier, parenting is out of relationship. The relationship primarily is with the child you're parenting. Now, at the community level, there is a way in which nowadays, I guess for security reasons, we all live in these gated enclosures where we don't, you know who owns the blue RAV4, and you know who owns, actually, people by the cars they drive. It's the other neighbor with the Range Rover. It's the other neighbor, you know, you don't communicate, you don't connect. I think that time has come when we need to know who our neighbors are. When from time to time, you go out and walk in your community and meet the people walking, or the closed gates, it's very likely that we are to each other. So we need to get out, talk to the kids. Children are to connect to them. You meet kids going to school from time to time. I mean, there are some neighborhoods where kids still walk to school. You can build a relationship. Most of the families that we know in our neighborhood, we have met through the children. Maybe because we are grandparents now and we are drawn to small children again. But we have met the parents of these children. They call me Auntie Beatrice and they call my husband Uncle Beatrice, but that's how we have met their parents. And in that way, we are able to say, you know, that was not a good thing you did. You know, when you see them doing something naughty, you can actually say, you don't even have to tell them, I will tell your parents. You just say to them, that was not a good thing. So as we connect to the kids and through them connect to their families, I think there's a way in which we can re-engage. So roll the windows down. I know you have AC, but roll the windows down. Wave to your neighbor. Once you wave 2-3 times, the next thing will be, hello, how are you? The next thing will be, oh, I am so and so, I am from the other house over there. And connections are made. Go to the LC meetings when they're called. That's another good way to meet the people in your neighborhood. You find out who lives where. And through that, build relationships slowly, and you will meet the kids. And when you see the kids know that I cannot do any monkey business around here because all these people along this road know me and they know my parents. So it's going to be harder, but it can be done.
Okay, and that was focusing on the parents, but now there's the children, and now we have children who can talk back. We have children who seem to know what they want. We have children who, you know, people are being told to be independent even when you're still a child. So what approach for now the children?
I have actually, on a number of occasions, said I live near a school. So when schools were open, we would run into many children in the morning walking down to their school. And on a number of occasions, I actually stopped the car because 3 children were walking in a line and I couldn't get past them. So on a number of occasions, I have stopped the car, rolled down my window, and pointed my finger at a child and said, you do not walk like that. If you walk like that and a car knocks you, you are going to get hurt and your parents are not going to be. On occasion, I said, next time I see you do that, I will spank you myself. I mean, it puts the fear of God in a primary school child. Yes, they talk back, but that's because we also shrug our shoulders and say, oh, wank, omwana w'abandi, you know, you don't do anything. We've also kind of declined. We've given up. We've given up. So we need to re-engage. We need to talk to the children themselves. Threatening to tell their parents doesn't always help, but I think we can help in talking to them.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Leonard Imanishimwe, I hope you're still there and you can hear me. Leonard? Leonard, do I have you? Oh, yes, there you are. If you could just unmute your microphone. I'd like to ask you in relation to, there was that question on pornography. It was asked by Priscilla Seruka, and just emphasizing the ease with which children can now access gadgets and people can send things to them You did talk about this a bit. What can be done to limit that? And then the second issue is, we talked about the sexual debut coming 13 for girls, 15 for boys, which basically means for girls, their sexual debuts with people that are older than them. Um, and even from the laws, 18 and below, if you're getting involved in any sexual act, it is a crime. But you know that there are, in another breath, we are telling people, well, if you're going to do it safely. How this mixed messaging, how do we also deal with it? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. For pornography, I think now exposure to pornography, the risk is higher than previously because young people are now spending more time at home. And there is now, I think one of the ways parents could do, we need to explore the parental control options in terms of television so that young people have specific times when they can watch TV. There are cases where some parents have taken a decision to remove TV completely, not subscribe for particular times. So it depends on what the parents can decide because young people also have access to phones. And we need to make a decision whether the child should be given the phone to go in the bedroom and be able to follow and chat and converse with the friends, because then there is the risk. But I think also having a courageous conversation with the children, I think it's very important that parents don't shy away from having a courageous conversation on issues of sexuality, on issues of guidance, because I think the policing mode of parenting may have weaknesses, because then it requires that the parent will always be there to ensure that in case the young people go off board, they can be whipped back in line. But I think these conversations that are candid and frank would be able that cultivate value system. I think then they would allow the young person to exercise self-censorship, to know that this is not good for me because it will define my mind. And that way then, even when the parent is away, because they have agreed, they have discussed on the basics foundation, why don't you want us to watch this? Why don't you want that? Then we can understand that probably when you see these things, they get into your mind and you'll be able to they will define you before it is time. That way the young people will be able to know why. So rather than just talk to them or dictate to them, we need also to be able to share with them so that they can understand the why. On the question of early sexual debut, I think the problem has been the sexualization. Madam Bit has been involved in fighting with development partners that wanted to promote the teaching of the comprehensive sexuality education in classes like even primary P3 as well as primary 3. So we are seeing a lot of, even whether it is media, there is a lot of sexual talk. So there is a lot young people are hearing a lot of sexual talk in their mind that is not guided, that is not true. Some of it is coming from the negative peer pressure from their peers. And I think while the basic responsibility goes to the parents to be able to handle the aspect of sexuality education that is age appropriate, to be able to answer, because sometimes we think the young people don't know, but they have a lot of unanswered questions. And it is important that parents can be able to listen or even ask, even start with what the kids are already hearing, to be able to ensure that they can respond their questions appropriately. And I think that somebody says the board on pornography, I think needs to be empowered to be able to do its work, especially now that we are getting even TV programming that may be content that is inappropriate coming. during the prime time when children are still active, I think all that the regulatory agencies need to do their work. But the basic foundation lies with the parents being able to have time with their children, cultivating a relationship of friendship, and being able to explain to their parents the danger, to the children, the dangers that are facing them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Reverend Canon Senyonyi, you brought up an issue of role models. And unfortunately, it's not a culture in Uganda to mentor. Um, uh, we don't quite have this formal mentoring culture. Where do we start from? And I say this with a relatively heavy heart because I've spoken to many young men within the church, and they reveal that they only get to interact with the older men when they're already in a problem. So it's because they're already in the middle of an issue, they've messed up, that they get to interact with you. And yet you are there, you are present.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much, Gabriel, for that question, because I thought it had not been brought up as strongly. And yet, just like what you're saying, I have also experienced that. And with many of the young people, of course, these are young adults, but I have noticed that many of these young adults who are sent there, the interesting thing is many parents send to a university like Uganda Christian University so that the Christian University can reform the children that they themselves have failed to reform. And so one of the things that we did there was to establish a mentorship policy so that all staff, especially lecturers, but also administrative staff, I myself as Vice Chancellor was mentoring students every term where I would spend time. Now, where to begin? And that was your major question. I want to pick on a very important statement which I think could be
Dr. Senyonyi, it looks like your video has frozen. I don't know if you're able to hear me. And I just need to make sure that it is not only mine that has frozen. Let's see. He has frozen,
Yes,
huh? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for notifying me. It's not just mine. Dr. Senyonyi, we are going to have to come back to you. And I think the last thing you said was an important statement. I don't know if you'll be able to remember where you left off. But okay, as we try and get Dr. Senyonyi back, I'd actually like to go to BIT. And so many things have been said, so many questions have been asked. And in relation to, you know, some of the recommendations, you know, from the person who presented the piece, where do you see we can start from? Because this actually, yes, there should be a comprehensive roadmap, but we need to at least start somewhere, even as we wait to deal with everything. Dr. Senyonyi, we're going to come back to you just after Mrs. Bisangwa responds to this question.
Sorry, I went off briefly.
Thank you, Iguma. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Yes, it's an intriguing question. Actually, it's funny that you've asked it because I was writing it on my paper and saying, so where do we start? After listening to this wealth of information from such experts, you know, thank you, Beatrice, Leonard, you know, Innocent and Doctor. It's really been very, very enriching. And I believe that you're going to end up with a very comprehensive write-up that will be helpful. So I was asking myself, okay, so there's this, there's the church, there's the government, there's the civil society, there's where do we start? And it's a question like that of an egg and chicken, you know, which came first and which should come first, and it can be debated. But in what I concluded was that maybe at this point, it would have to take government to put to give guidelines and strategies on who should be doing what, kind of guiding the stakeholders and putting policies and strategies and guidelines for the different players. Okay, I think that's where we need to start, because somebody at the helm of governance needs to do that, and then create an environment where these things are being talked about, and then religious leaders are encouraged to develop materials, and then the education system is encouraged to kind of adjust and put these. And then the other thing I thought about was that maybe we need faculty for family, because if we think it's really this important and it's at the core of government or state transformation, and we are saying we even need a whole ministry just to focus on this. Because if you get the family right, by the way, governance issues will be less, governance problems will be less. So if we have a ministry, and then we have a whole subject in universities on family, and it talks about how you prepare for relationships, how you should start dating, how family is done. And then I've also noticed that every time we talk about family, we tend to focus on children protection, but everything starts with a couple. You get the couple right, you get the marriage right, the rest is easy to solve. But you're getting two dysfunctional people, like they said earlier on, and then you expect them to pass on the right values of which they don't have, skills of which they don't have. So let's start and focus on what is marriage. What does it entail? What does it take to build a solid marriage relationship? And then from there, we can talk about parenting as the next step, and then preparing young adults in going into relationships and preparing for marriage, and then the cycle will go on. So those are my thoughts, and they are maybe debatable. We need to really, really discuss on this. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted, to share.
I'm actually when in a few minutes I'm going to come to all the panelists to give their closing word, and when I do, I'm actually going to ask each of us to share where you think we should start from. So all of you can prepare for that. But Reverend Senyonyi, I'd like now to come back to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry I went off briefly. I don't know what happened. But you were asking me about role modeling. And I say the first thing is presence. It's very, very important that we are present with our children. Part of the problem is that many parents, and it has been noted in some of the Q&A comments, are absentee landlords. They're just not there. Now, of course, I don't want to go back to elaborate on what kind of presence we are talking about. I think it's very evident in what we've been discussing here that we are talking of parents who themselves have chosen to be formed right, to be formed in a good way, so that in being present with them, they know that this matters. Simple things like, do you know the child's birthday? What do you do when the birthday comes? Are very important. Simple things, okay, the hugs out there, we cannot give them, but who denies them in the family unless you are COVID positive? Those little things that I think are important, because role modeling is best where the child is actually present with you, rather than your absence speaking louder than your presence. May I say one other thing that I want to particularly emphasize the importance of fathers. I did read some research years ago that was talking about the whole issue of homosexuality. And it so happens, and many people don't seem to be so aware of this, that many children who get caught up in the web of this sexual dysfunction, these sexual habits, are usually children whose fathers have been absent, or when they have been present, they have been abusive. And that predisposes them to all manner of failures in their own lives. And so I want to say that a father is absolutely essential. And may I add, there is also a difference in research that shows that there is a difference between a father who is dead and the child knows the father is not around because the child is dead, and a father who is alive but actually dead in the child's life. And so all those are things that play into role modeling, but going into further detail, I think it would be a lot more, but we need to be able to pass on. Of course, the question we need to ask is, what do we pass on when we are role modeling? First of all, your own life. What are you doing? What are the things you show that you value the most? What is your faith and how is it exhibited even before the child? What about your relationship with your wife or with your husband? Forget about, and this is where culture, I think, distorts things. Forget about this whole business of saying that in our culture, a husband cannot hug a wife or cannot give a peck to a wife or hold hands with a wife. To me, those are unfortunately the things that need to be thrown out gradually. It's very important for the child to know that you love one another, the father and the mother. That in itself is role modeling. So I could go on and on, but I think Gabriel wouldn't have the time. Role modeling is a big thing. It's the entire life of the people being displayed before the child, and of course, even what we say to them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Before you go off, there's this issue of work-life balance. And I'm asking this because I know for as long as I have known you, you've been super busy. You are a reverend. Of course, you're a husband, a father. You are a leader in the church, vice chancellor heading an institution, among other things. How do how advice on balancing that and yet staying functional, playing the roles that you have just said of a man, and basically leading a family? Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me begin with a little principle that I personally have held all along, especially when it talks about the work that I do, even the ministry that I do. And I say, I can lose a job and find another.
Oh, unfortunately, I think his video has frozen again. So, Dr. Senyonyi, we will get that from you when we come to you for your closing remark. I'd like to go back to Leonard. Leonard, the issue of absentee parents and the effect it's having on young people. If you could just respond to that very quickly.
Thank you so much. I think one of the things that needs to be done is related to the role modeling. In cases where the parent is absent, whether it is the father or the mother, I think there is an aspect we're talking about community support, maybe within the family, the large extended family. There is somebody who can play the father figure, the mother figure, or the auntie figure, and they are more involved in the life of the child. I think that's in cases where the parents probably is dead, is not there. But in cases where the father or the mother is there, but probably they are absent because of work related, I think the work family balance is very important to ensure that we could get time for our children. Because you could say, I'm working for my children, and then when they become empty, if their love jar is empty, they may need to substitute that by abusing alcohol and other drugs and the substance abuse. And then you'll find that probably you spent the afternoon of your life working for your children, and you are going to spend the evening of your life trying to now to take them to rehab. So I think we need to know that after the money that we want and all the material and the property we want is for the good of our children, but we need them alive. We need them happy. We need them when they are okay. And I think we may have an unhappy evening if our children have not been brought up properly. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mrs. Langer, we have talked about the issue of absentee fathers. Someone asked a question around absentee mothers. Could you please respond to that? And also generally the role of a mother. Mrs. Langer? Your microphone is cut. Okay, excellent. Go right ahead.
Yeah. I am very passionate about helping young ladies understand the seasons of their lives. I think it is very important to understand that for us women, there is the time for finishing school, then we get married. Usually shortly after that, we start having children. The mix-up comes when the children have arrived, the career is beckoning, and we can't make the balance. I would like to propose that women consider that there is a season for bearing children and a season for bringing those children up. And when that season arrives, the career can be put on hold. I have a personal testimony. I was a stay-home mother when my children were young. And in that time, I was able to spend time with both my children who are now adults and then gradually enter the work world. And I finished, as I said, as the head of the human resource manager department in the place that I was employed for 14 years. So it is possible to take that time off to give your children a start and then pick it up from there. You have your peace of mind, so you can actually give your employers a better package because you're not worrying about your 6-month-old baby that you left at home. You're not worrying about your maid leaving and you have no maid. You have put that to rest and your child is now in school at about age 3.5, maybe even 4. My younger child started school at 3.5. The older one started after 4. So it is possible to take that time off and respect the seasons of your life. If, for example, you start having children in your mid or late 20s, and you take about 10 years, and now you're in your mid or late 30s, you still have a good 20 years to work, to be employed. And that can begin gradually as the children begin school. So there is time to have your cake and eat it too. I am a living testimony of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Senyonyi, let's come back to you.
Yeah, I'm
And
really
you
sorry
left
about
off when you were
this.
saying, yeah, sorry about that. You left off saying you can lose your job and get another, and that's the
Yeah.
point where we lost you.
Yeah, but you can't get another family if you lose it. And so as far as I'm concerned, I made it a point that when my children's visitation day was due, I would not even go to a church commitment that would extend into the time of the visitation. So I had to be at school. And even picking children from school, that was something I did personally. I do remember my predecessor, the vice chancellor, being an American. He was worried that when it came to picking children, his deputy vice chancellor would go away to pick a child. But for me, that there was no compromise on that. So I think we need to understand the priority of family first and foremost. That's very important. And then after that, we need to decide what kind of activities we shall do together. Let's not pack up our life to the point where the children are only receiving the leftovers of your time. So if when I'm home, I do know when to stop working, I do know when to be with my children. Now, of course, it's grandchildren. Once they are with us, I give them full time and I know when exactly to be with them and when exactly to do other things. Of course, now I'm retired, I have a bit more time, but that is a beautiful thing. So to me, it begins with priority. What is your priority in terms of, I think we need to weigh when you talk about family, when you talk about work, when you talk about making money, you are making money for a family that you do not know. To me, that is not acceptable. If I'm going to make money, let me make money for a family with whom I have a relationship. And that's why I liked the statement that Beatrice Langer made, that parenting is out of relationship. Even issues like television and so forth, the children will watch the television, they will choose anything and even go into pornography. And I'm not saying that's the only reason, largely because the parents are not giving them the priority that they need to give them. If they're watching a movie, what's wrong with you watching it with them and then critiquing it with them so that they get to understand what is right and what's wrong? Because most of the movies today are putting in something about homosexuality, for example, or sex anyway, or telling lies or things like that. And those become teachable moments, I think, that need to be used. So let's not be too busy for our families.
All right, thank you. I'm going to come to you for your final word and on where can we start. But let me begin with Leonard. Leonard, where do we start from and your final word? Leonard, go right ahead. Your microphone is unmuted. Your video isn't. There you go. Yes.
I think I have a problem with my, okay. I think the starting point, I think we need a one-stop center within the government that would be for central coordination on matters related with family, culture, and values. At the moment, if you have the Ministry of Gender, you have education, you have the national guidance, you have ethics and integrity. And so I think we need a one-stop center that if I walk into this, I would be helped. So the counseling services, the call centers, the law enforcement aspect of the police to handle violence and all that is there. I think the other thing also is the curriculum and the content development. Sometimes we complain that our young people are accessing bad content, but where is the alternative content? What are we providing? Whether it is in terms of what are the good movies that we will see? I think that's the entertainment industry and the media industry. I think rather than sit back and be able to critique and maybe say this is bad, I think we need also to be intentional in developing content that can be used, good content that is good for our young people. And then also, what kind of livelihood support and social protection for families that are struggling. So I think we need social protection and livelihood improvement for our young people. And then value focused education and training, because for example, in Africa, generally a young person may not feel good about themselves in terms of their identity. Who are we? Who am I? What is it about me? Uh, if I am dark skinned, why would I spend more money in buying cosmetics that would make me light? So all that, we need to understand that I am who I am, self-awareness, self-esteem, issues to do with the confidence and appreciating, especially for the youth, who they are. And then we need also to celebrate marriage, celebrate family. The media stories are normally of so and so has killed the other one, there is child abuse, but I think there are a lot of good stories that are out there. There are a lot of fathers that are making a difference. There are a lot of children that need to be celebrated. And I think we need probably an awards program or a national program to celebrate fathers, to celebrate mothers, celebrate children who are making it despite the difficult situation. So I think we need that to celebrate marriage, to celebrate family as an institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Langer? Mrs. Beatrice Langer, over to you. Your parting shot you had, and in your view, where can we start from?
Yes, my closing comment again is to re-emphasize that parenting should be out of relationship. And the relationship is the relationship you have with your children, but also the relationship that you have with each other as husband and wife, because you cannot parent any better than the quality of the relationship that you have with each other. So in order to help that relationship to work, I think we need to invest a lot more time and energy in premarital counseling to prepare couples to have good marriages. I'm not talking about 2 days before the wedding, but maybe something as long as 6 months, so that the couple is even given the option of breaking up if they feel that this thing is not what they expected. They are given the opportunity of addressing the baggage that is going to come in the way of their relationship as a couple. So we need to invest in that, help the couple get off to a good start, set them up with couples that can mentor them so that they begin on a good foundation and can raise their family in a happy relationship with each other.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Langer. Over to Mrs. Beat Bisangwa.
Okay, Gabriel, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to
Now
do?
your parting shot. Your parting shot. We come to the
my
end.
parting shot. My
Unfortunately,
parting
yes.
shot that we continue advocacy activities. We continue speaking, we continue advocating and lobbying for conversations among all key stakeholders that we develop together strategies for the way forward. That's really what I want us to do. Let's continue speaking. Let's go to the media. Let's write articles. Let's go to government. Let's go to parliament. Let this conversation speak. International Day of Family is a very good platform to speak, advocating for Year of Family and then doing something about it. And between the first day of the family and the next day of the family, I think we need to start at policy level, because we can do little things, develop manuals, yes, we train and maybe speak to those near us and maybe speak to the children, yes, but if we don't start at large, up there, so that we do it at a higher level, large scale, we are going to continue achieving small outputs, and yet it could be nationwide. So if you're going nationwide, then we talk at national level. We engage cabinet ministers, we engage MPs, and we just keep rolling until we get things that we are talking about in place. The policies, the manuals, the trainings, the religious leaders, everybody on board, so that we can all see how to preserve this very important family institution. Thank you.
All right. Just before you leave, Alex Wesije says, we need to have an annual family conference aimed at deliberating on legal, institutional, and policy frameworks on the family. What do you think of this?
It actually does happen in line with the International Day of Family every 15th of May. So let him look forward to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Reverend Canon Senyonyi, over to you for your parting shot.
Thank you very much. One of the things I had intended actually to part with is, and I think where CASO should be able to help us, is to bring out a strategy for engaging the media. A strategy for engaging the media. And I don't think I need to say more than that, unless we do not understand the importance of the media in influencing culture and values, because media is very global. So I'll leave that at that. But I just want to say Three other things that, once again, I want to bring out to CASO as challenges. The first, they are in the way of questions. The first one is what, the second one is who, the third one is how. And when I say what, the question is what values should be passed on? It's very easy for us to be here and expect government to define values. Now, those will be very broad indeed, and it will require for us to be to participate. But let me just take, for example, even on the religious landscape, you do find that the values, say the way we value life or the way we value the woman, those are different. So values, what values are we talking about that we want to pass on? I do know that government indeed works on this, but something that we need to be engaged in. Who, I'm talking about who are the stakeholders in passing on these values? Who are the stakeholders? And I think it has been said repeatedly and rightly that family is the very first one. If you leave family out, whether it is in education or it is in culture or it is in community, then you've missed everything else. So we need to be able to define the stakeholders. Who are these stakeholders? Some of whom we have already made mention of, so I don't need to belabor that point. But thirdly, then, how? The strategies to inculcate these values. And this will require even educating. Let's not make the assumption that religious leaders have the wherewithal to actually do what needs to be done. Many religious leaders are simply trying out. They are not very sure exactly what needs to be done. So we need a strategy, and we need to lay out those strategies. How shall we inculcate? And I just want to leave these on the desk for CASO to pick up, but because I think I'm raising much bigger questions than I can answer in the few minutes that we do have. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.
Thank you very much. CASO think tank is a think tank. Therefore, yes, putting things on their table is a very good thing. I'd like now to come to our special guest. And there are a number of questions that had been put to you. I had asked some. Some people would like to know where to find the family policy that you can respond to very quickly. And also these values that you talked about, the 13, is there room, to contribute to them? Maybe, CASO or whoever else, just looking at them, and is there room for, maybe adding or removing some or putting some together, over to you, Mr. Biaruhanga.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can, but I can't see you at the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much, moderator. My parting shots and responding to where we can, a number of things that have been asked is to, first of all, say I'm very, very, very thankful to BIT, Canon Senyonyi, Leonard, my sister and my respected friend, Mrs. Langa, for your invaluable time and your insights. I've shared with people that when they say Uganda is the most beautiful country, it also comes to the point that in a number of, we have resources that are with us in terms of giving us what would be the solutions. And as the problem has been, the problem we have had is about the actions that we need. So for me, think tank, together with the team that was selected, I don't know which wisdom we used. I want to thank you very, very, very much. And I would like to quickly request that we should have an administrative physical interaction over all of this, and hopefully at the end of this seminars, we're going to have an evaluation and pick a concrete policy brief that we can share with the ministry so that we take it on for concrete action. For me, the theme here as IPAT is action, action, action. We have a lot in stock for what should be done, but what is actually done is not satisfactory, and that's why we're having these challenges. The family policy is still in a draft. We expect that before December it will be approved, and when it is approved, it will be a public document which can be actual accessed, and that's where we have beautiful things to do with what are those national family values, and then members are able to know them and to move on. In terms of stakeholder consultations, procedurally, we finalized the stakeholder consultations. Unfortunately, the CASO was missed, but what's going to happen is that as soon as the policy is launched, it is a living document for implementation. And so stakeholders will have an opportunity of inputting to the implementation mechanisms of when we are talking about values and all that. And in addressing what Canon Senyu was mentioning, in terms of these values, the what, the who, and the stakeholders, we already have something very concretely outlined in the action plan of this family. I hope CASO's job will be a bit lessened when we concretely make collaborations and networks. I want to then come to two things briefly. That one, I have always, whenever I've introduced myself and I said I greet you from my greetings from my family and to your families, a number of stakeholders, some who are above than me, you can imagine, some even take me to the side after the meeting and ask, why do you mention about your family? And that comes to the dilemma that I talked about, that although we have a Department of Culture and Family Affairs, it is not yet thinking that when something is important as to appear in the structural department board of government, then it is a matter that should be of priority for all of us. And so my issue is, history is going to judge us on whether, as stakeholders gathered here, as discussants and as stakeholders in CASO, whether this conversation is going to go on after COVID. And not only going on, but seeing a difference in terms of the unsatisfactory things we are seeing. Lastly, I want to say that the family, as has been mentioned, remains an institution that, if focused on in terms of programming, solves a number of problems, including when you talk about child protection. I liked bits when he says the programming has based on children, but not looked at the family and looked at who brought the children. And rightly so, because the world body is designed like that. And so the wisdom of our government we are calling on, where I am in also as an insider, is nobody is going to address family sensitive interventions other than Uganda and other than the Republic of Uganda. And so the whole point is here that let's strengthen the family and build our nation. Thank you very
All
much.
right. Thank you very much, Mr. Biaruhanga, our special guest today, and to all our panelists. Thank you very much for this wisdom that you have shared with us. We've come to the end of our webinar. I apologize that we've run a little over the time, but if you could just allow us about 3 minutes, because we're going to get closing remarks from Honorable Benson Obua, who started us off. But just before he comes, please respond to this poll question that is appearing on your screen right now. This is our final poll question. At the end of everything, we would like to know, what is the most effective move government should make to improve family, culture, and values? What is the most effective move government should make to improve family, culture, and values? Because we couldn't get a way forward from each of you, we will use the poll to get that. So establishing a ministry just dedicated to family affairs, establishment of a program to equip families with basic life skills, promote intergenerational dialogue to encourage mentoring, and mutual respect between parents and young adult children. And then none of the above would be effective because government cannot solve family problems. I'll just allow 10 more seconds. If you could respond to that poll question. What is the most effective move government should make to improve family culture and values? All right, let's end it there. Majority of us, 47%, have said establish a ministry just dedicated to family affairs. Thank you very much. Honorable Obua, over to you.
Yes, thank you once again, Gabriel, and thank you for conducting this webinar. You've always done it very well. It comes with mastery, and we appreciate you keep time. And I'm not going to take any more time than I should. However, on the program, actually, I see that I was supposed to be closing this with remarks and pray 11:55 p.m. I was I won't take the risk of taking you up to that time. I will still pray at that time, but I'll close now. So thank you very much. My role is very easy now, is to just say thank you to the panelists. I want to thank most especially our guest, special guest, you've done a great job, and we want to pledge that as Castle, you can count on us to do whatever you feel we can do. And you asked us to give you, some briefs from this webinar. We can only say we will be able to do that in the shortest possible time, so that possibly they could go into the policy formulation processes that you are engaging in. I want to thank very much Bit Bisangwa for that think piece. It was very powerful. I want to thank Leonard Manishimwe for your thoughtful insight. You're doing a great job where you are engaging with youth. I want to thank Mrs. Beatrice Langa for those great insights, and Reverend Canon Dr. John Senyonyi. Your practical experiences always come handy. I've heard all these speakers before except Innocent and Leonard, but each time they speak, even if it's about the same topic or issues, they always come with freshness. So I want to thank all of you. I will not forget to thank our board chair, Dr. James Magara. We thank you for the leadership. We thank you, your technical team, who are always in the background making this possible. Our experts in IT, coordinators and mobilizers to make this possible. But we would have been talking to ourselves if we didn't have participants. There are regular participants who have always blocked this time every Saturday for the 2.5 hours that we are always here. You really are the ones who make this possible. Thank you very much. Of you asked questions, and thank you for the great answers that have come through, and even the comments. Castle is relatively young. This is for the benefit of Innocent. Is relatively young, maybe slightly old, and just as we were beginning to be active, COVID, struck. So we chose this platform to be able to still be of friends and be impactful in different spheres. And we want to pledge that we will continue to do our very best to make sure that Castle is helping different different in the US. So do not hesitate to contact us for any. On that note, may we humble ourselves as we pray. Let's pray. Father, we want to thank you for this that we've had together. As Castle, Lord God, want to thank you that every week you make us useful to your people in this nation and beyond. And Father, the things that we discuss here, I know they always touch your very heart. And we know more especially that family is very, very important to you. You created it first. And Father, whatever we see here today concerning our culture, our family, and even values, may you, oh God, help us to practicalize them and make them part and parcel of our society. We ask you, Lord God, to continue teaching us what we need to do for our nation to be strong, great, because we learned to be the basic unit of society. So, Father, may we have this building block edified and whole. We thank you, everyone who has participated and everyone who lent us their brilliant ideas that gave us their time, God. And now, Father, as we go about our businesses for the rest of the day and even the week coming, Lord, we ask you to continue making us mindful of what's happening around us. Seems to be some experience of infections in some areas. We are trusting you, oh Lord, for protection, but we also trusting you, Lord, that you keep reminding us of things that we need to do to avoid being infected and to avoid infecting others. And now, Lord, we thank you and we pray that you will answer us. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Honorable Obua, and thank you very much, all our panelists and the attendees. Like Honorable Obua said, next week we will have another webinar, same time, Saturday, 9 a.m. to midday, and we'll be talking about agribusiness. We know that agriculture is an essential sector of our economy, employing a large portion of our population, and yet we have had issues around agribusiness, value addition. So join us for a discussion about this next Saturday. You will receive an email through which you can actually register to be part of the conversation. From me and everybody that's involved in bringing these webinars to you, thank you very much. God bless you. Until we meet again. Bye-bye.